Good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining Goose Digital's Surviving and Thriving with a Department of One webinar today. We're excited to get going. We thank everyone for joining. So we've got an action-packed next 28 minutes or so let's waste no more time. Today we've got our agenda as follows. We're going to learn all about who Goose Digital is and this voice, myself speaking, as well as Telepin and our wonderful guest, Joanne Kiskis. We're going to talk about marketing's evolution, where it's come from to where it is today, and the challenges marketers face as a result. Certainly dive into how a nimble marketing department can organize itself in the face of these challenges, as well as moving forward into all the tasks, goals, and deliverables required. We're going to talk about an approach to lead generation that makes sense for nimble marketing departments and organizations, and finally ways to scale those programs and efforts so that you're meeting your targets and everyone's satisfied and really seeing the value in what marketing can offer an organization. Lastly, we'll be addressing a few questions that anyone may have, just a bit of housekeeping. We will be, one, sending a recording of this webinar within 2 business days of this session. And as well, if you do have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box of GoToWebinar, and we should be able to address those at the end. If we don't get to your questions, we'll be happy to follow up one-on-one after the webinar to make sure that we answer whatever question it is that you have. So we're really excited about that. Okie doke. So first and foremost about Goose Digital. Goose Digital is a marketing automation focused digital marketing agency based out of Toronto. We have offices across Edmonton and Vancouver respectively. And our focus, our core competency is marketing automation, implementing, supporting, and driving value from any number of the leading marketing automation platforms, including Acton, HubSpot, Marketo, and several Salesforce platforms, including Marketing Cloud, Pardot, and even into some of the functions of its cloud CRM. From there, our expertise ranges across a variety of different verticals, including tech, finance, and within there is insurance and all sorts of other credit union type financial institution type organizations, manufacturing, and even retail. We also specialize in underpinning technology with long-term strategy. And I think as marketers, many of us know there's got to be a level of strategy as far as the bigger, broader go-to-market picture, but also the strategy of what are we doing, what are the tools we're using to support that, and generally speaking, how will it work? We're really good at going in and understanding those things, and so I do think strategy can be seen as a heavy word, and we try to make it lightweight, but ask the question, what are we really trying to accomplish here, and how do the tools support that? As I mentioned, offices across Canada, and finally, we have deep roots in helping organizations transform its marketing and general operations, and I think a lot of organizations who invest in marketing and who want to prioritize building their marketing programs sometimes require a change in what's the process with sales and how do we explain and set expectations with executives and management. I really think a marketing investment in having a really strong go-to-market ability in 2020 is all about having that kind of organization and changing processes around that. And our mission and mandate is to make sure marketing has a seat at the table as a critical department worth investing in for every organization, regardless of size, industry, or audience type. So in saying that, my name is Kevin Butler. Once again, thank you very much for joining. I'm the VP of Strategy at Goose Digital. I've been with the company just about 4 years now, and myself have a 15-year background leading tech marketing organizations, mostly on the small and medium size, and as well going into larger organizations. I've been an early adopter of marketing automation myself, dating back to the mid-2000s. And my big thing, we put little quotes here to give some perspective on who we are as people, but my big thing is ensuring there's got to be a level of strategy before deciding on the tactics and tools. Tools themselves aren't a strategy, they're merely an ability to do things about it. So to me, it starts with strategy, and that will dictate and define what we're doing, how we're doing it, and who we're going to communicate it to. And finally, myself personally, I have a high growth track record. That's always been my thing in growth marketing led organizations. And that's my focus whenever working with any organization like Goose Digital. So I'm proud to say that we work with tons and tons of organizations, and we have a heavy hand in their ability to grow. So what I'd like to do is turn this over to Joanne, let her introduce herself. I think she's really the star of today's production, as well tell us a bit about Telepin. Joanne?
Hey everybody, thanks very much for joining. Appreciate your time to join us today. My name's Joanne Kiskis. I'm Director of Marketing and Sales Operations at Telepin. I myself have been in marketing for a lot of years, 18 years or so, in B2B tech, small companies, big companies. I've done everything from content writing to lead gen to events to systems to website overhauls to importing leads and creating pathways. I've actually have a lot of experience in marketing automation myself. I implemented systems at other companies as well. So have a very, very diverse background. And I really do believe that, as much detail as we all marketers have to get into, it really is still people buying from people. And I'm trying every day to make sure I remember that. It's hard. It's not about us as a company, Telepin. It is about who we can help and who we can serve. Telepin, we're in a unique space. We do a mobile money platform. So again, this is a platform. It's not internet banking. So we serve a population. Many of our clients are in Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia. They are mobile network operators, financial service providers, and a whole bunch of other different types of businesses who want to provide a platform for people who are unbanked to be able to use a mobile money platform to transfer money. So it's a very niche market. There's a few players. A couple of our competitors are quite big, so I've really had to be creative in being able to get the Telepin name out in front of our audience.
Wonderful.
Kevin?
Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great segue to this idea of people buy from people. And I think that leads us into our first section here. And marketing's really evolved over the years. We've got kind of like the background or backdrop of Manhattan and Times Square, and this idea that it's not quite all about sort of loud advertising today. And then we've come from that world, and to really break that point down and hit it home is this idea of we've come from a place of hundreds of years ago. It was about sort of the side of the wall billboard advertisements, and really marketing's function was to drive industry and audience awareness, making sure people knew about the brand. And I think now we've seen marketing really transition to owning what we would call the end-to-end customer experience. And that really, to me, means from that audience awareness piece that we've always had to worry about through into identifying leads, generating leads, and from there helping support sales cycles, and then into now this new sort of facet of customer marketing and owning a level of the revenue that the customers bring. And that's really this kind of evolution of where marketing's come from. But one thing that hasn't changed, Joanne, to your point, is people still buy from people, and now we're using data and technology and more sophisticated approaches to do all that. And so what we've tried to depict here on this slide is this idea of the new level of responsibilities marketing has. It's this expanded journey ownership, we call. And it starts with, on the left-hand side, branding and awareness through to lead gen and qualification. And then all of a sudden, we have what we call a transition point. And this is where marketing and sales truly have to be aligned in the approach of how do we go to market, how do we generate leads, and what do we do with them once we actually create the lead and identify it. And so there's that sort of switch or transition where now sales takes, if you think about a lead role into unearthing this opportunity, closing the opportunity, hopefully. And then at that point, marketing is coming in and supporting whatever the sales cycle requires. So there's that interchanging of roles, marketing and sales. But where it gets really interesting is we've been successful and we've closed the deal, and all of a sudden now the roles flip again, and marketing is likely leading part of the customer's experience now, that customer marketing component, whether it's updates and newsletters, or even potentially into upsells and other value add type communications. And then that second transition point hits where potentially there's a customer renewal involved, and that salesperson gets back involved in sort of guiding the process that needs to happen there. And so the interchanging of lead and supporting roles between marketing and sales is this new evolution, and really at the end of the day, to me, represents this concept of marketing has to own a lot more of the end-to-end journey now, something that didn't happen years and years ago. And so what does that really mean for marketers? Well, I think it means marketers are now the new Swiss Army knife of any organization. I think now more than ever, marketers have to be versatile and agile. And we've tried to list a few characteristics of the new marketer as far as where they have to be, some of the skill sets and abilities they may have to have, whether it's be data-driven, like Joanne mentioned off the hop, whether it's strategic and really focused on personalization. To me, probably the two most important parts of this slide is now more than ever, you are revenue and in some cases profitable or profit accountable. And so you're going to be held to levels of quotas and targets. And at the end of the day, there's no longer this thing of marketing saying, look, we drove leads and we're done. I think now we're in this through the thick of it with sales. And that's the other secondary really big point here is you have to be a partner to sales and more importantly, a partner towards the organization's revenue growth goals. So back to you, Joanne, I'd love for you to weigh in and see what have you seen and experienced in your 18-year career in marketing? How have you seen marketing evolve and really the growing responsibilities that you've probably seen and taken on throughout your career?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. You know, I mean, my goodness, you and I have talked about this. I know I've talked to this about this
Yeah.
many of my marketer friends. Honestly, I was making this list of all the kinds of things that I need to, you know, worry about, whether it's really fully from beginning to end, or it's something I need to make sure is on my project list. And I touch it a little bit. But you know, most tech companies that I've worked for and tech companies that I've met with before, they all have a need for a full marketing department, right? Because of all these tasks, which I'm going to list out in a second. You know, because the responsibilities are so big now, but most don't have the budget to keep like 3 or more people on staff. Really, you need some sort of a team leader of some kind and a couple of people, depending on your business. Maybe you have somebody who just produces videos, or maybe you have a designer because you really have an industry where, and the kind of marketing you need to do is heavy in design and you need someone full time for that. Maybe you have a content writer, somebody do social, right? Like you really do need at least 3 people to help kind of maintain and keep the lights on and push out and execute on programs. But I mean, there's literally no way I could do all this. To be an expert, or as I call it, a light expert in the particular industry I find myself in right now, it's mobile money. Been there for a few years now. You know, doing the strategy, the strategic planning, marketing automation platforms, not only knowing them, but actually using them to my full advantage. SEO, SEM, Google Ads, content writing, white papers, ebooks, briefs, blogs, like that's all content writing, right? I know there's all those marketers out there, you know exactly what I'm about to say, you know, all the lead generation, you know, I always hear that word, okay, lead generation. Well, you still have to generate the lead with something. You got to have content, right? Event management, you got to know your systems, whether that's Salesforce, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google, trying to understand how to use those platforms, product marketing. Not everyone has product marketing on their list, but I find myself doing that a fair bit. And then there's managing an online presence. So your website, social platforms, organic posts, and don't forget about sales tools, PowerPoints, diagrams, right? Like these are all things that marketing touches. It's crazy. There is no possible way I could do all of that, not only the strategic or even planning and then execute on it. And you don't have to, right? Like this is what we're talking about today. But even just writing that, I was like, what the heck, right? This is way too much stuff. And not only would you have to do all these things to really execute on your marketing program, but you have to measure it, and then you have to report on it, and then, you know, evaluate.
And that's a great lead into our next section is, okay, we've identified marketing holds so much more of the journey now than ever before. And there's all these sorts of things that we have to do. And Joanne, you listed just some of the many, and we have to figure out where they sort of slot in and what roles they play in different stages of the sales cycle. But the question really comes, how can a marketing department organize itself? And so this is how we think about it. And when we give advice or guidance to any organization, these are really the key questions that we think a marketing leader of a nimble marketing team needs to ask. And so first and foremost, it is, what internal resources or roles do you have today, or perhaps will be hiring soon if you've just started in the role and there's a bit of an investment going on in marketing that didn't exist prior to your arrival? What skill sets and specializations exist today within those resources or planned resources? And then that third question, this is really where it gets critical, is what are the 2 or 3 marketing capability gaps that exist, the things that you know need to happen to go run a successful and strong marketing program? What are the things you can do and can't do? That's the really key identifier right there. And then fourth, and also important, is what's the most critical knowledge you need to either retain or grow internally? And I recognize some organizations have a lot more knowledge than others. Maybe that's due to time in the seat or just general skill set and what you have available. But I think it's important to ask those questions. And there's other considerations that we've listed too that I think are helpful, and that's you have to have this sort of balance of learning new skills with leveraging speed and results right away. And what I mean is maybe you do intend to go and learn, I don't know, marketing automation systems because that's an important skill long-term for your department. But today, do you need that? And if not, maybe there's ways you can look at outsourcing or bulking up somewhere else. And so I think learning's important. And as marketing leaders, we want our teams to grow the right way. But that has to be balanced with getting to market quickly, getting results so that you're building pipeline and contributing to those revenue quotas we talked about earlier. And the other thing, and I know, Joanne, you've got some thoughts on this too, I'll let you weigh in real quick, is you can't do every marketing task right away. So I think it's important to ask yourself, what are the most critical for you achieving your goals today? Now, as I pull up this slide and talk about that, Joanne, maybe if you want to weigh in here and say, how do you view these kinds of marketing functions relative to what you think should be owned internally and perhaps what you can put into either outsourced buckets or even not even a priority today?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, you know, it can be very overwhelming, especially when you're, if you've all guessed this, I'm a team of one. I have one person in marketing and that is me. And it's hard because there is so much to learn, especially when you first start in a company. Even with my experience, I've never worked in mobile money before, of course. So I always feel like, I mean, obviously you're going to have to think about your strategy and how much budget you have, and what your maturity level is as well. So for us, we really needed to build our digital presence and create some good quick wins there. We needed to make sure that we were able to build the database, get the Telepin name in front of people, build up our platforms more. And so really, like, in for me are things like, in meaning inside Telepin, are industry specific things. It's complicated. Mobile money and our competition, especially because our competitors are across the world and we have many different countries, communities, and details around that. So strategy around that, messaging, what the content is, different targets, how our product is functioning and the different features that are important for different regions. Those things kind of stay in with me, and execution plans, right? So things I want to do to create this type of result or this type of outcome. But things that are out are, you know, I outsource graphic design, writing. I write a lot of stuff myself, but large projects, something ongoing, maybe like a blog, website management, promotions and monitoring, right? I can come up with the Twitter ads and the LinkedIn ads I want to do, but executing them, monitoring the platforms, putting all the ads on Google, those things I need help with. And it's executing and constant monitoring that I need help with. And then reporting on those things. There's no way I could touch all of that and figure out what we were doing if I just had myself. I like to call this kind of approach an on-demand marketing team. So this is kind of the slides Kevin's got up here.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think, Joanne, you're exactly right. This is how we typically fit in as an agency, and how we recommend it. I think the priority's got to be investing in industry and business knowledge and helping build up that core understanding within an internal marketing group so that you can go be a value add in any facet of marketing, whether it's supporting sales in a sales meeting, or if it's coming up with legitimately great content and themes from marketing to go and push new campaigns to that really resonate with an audience. You can't outsource that. Pricing and different sort of productization of the offerings, that's really got to stay internal. And I think while it's nice to have resources internally to actually manage ongoing lead gen programs or even your email marketing programs, maybe you can get to there one day, or maybe you can today if you have a deeper, broader team, but you can always outsource that stuff. And the reason is the smartest, hardest work is the stuff that's got to stay internal. And that's what we tried to list out here in the blue dot. And I think the green is things that you'd like to have, but maybe you just can't get to it all, to the previous slide's point, or even what Joanne's saying. And it's really about focusing on core competencies, because specialized agencies in things like SEM or even email marketing, they're probably able to do things faster, more efficiently, and more cost effective than, say, an internal resource doing it and learning at the same time. And that's that sort of balance point that we mentioned before. And in some cases, my last point here is some of it's just not a priority right now. And look, all of these things are important, but to Joanne's point, and it's a really great one, you can't do everything. And I think the mistake would be trying to do it all and not doing any of it really, really well. So again, it goes back to what are the things you really need to do today to start your marketing program? You can always evolve it later, but really identifying what those are and jumping into them and doing them really, really well. I think that's so key. So we've talked about all these things. How do you break them up? How do you structure a department? What do you focus on? Now we're going to talk about an approach to lead generation. And so every organization has a different way to view its sales cycle. What we've tried to do is break it down as the most highest level of buckets. There's your sort of air cover, which is, as we define it, high level branding, industry awareness, and general visibility. There's the top of funnel, which I'm sure every marketer on today's session probably hears about a lot. Where are the new leads? How many leads have we driven? We need more leads. And then everything that goes into understanding the quality and engagement of those leads, down into the middle of the funnel, and then finally bottom of the funnel. And the other thing we try to do when we have these conversations with marketers is to say, okay, this is where marketing has to own a function, and this is where that handoff to sales comes. And so if you think back to the alternating or transition of sales and marketing responsibilities in that end-to-end journey, this is an extension of that, whereby marketing is really going to own the front or the top of the funnel, and sales is going to own the bottom or sort of back end of it, if you will. And so I think this really helps frame up where marketing needs to focus and how they're going to go do it. And so what we've tried to showcase here is a pretty standard view as to how we think about activities related to both that air cover and top of funnel perspective. And these are all pretty generic initiatives or marketing deliverables, but you kind of get a sense as to, okay, this is really where the marketing leader is going to sit down each quarter and say, these are the priorities for campaigns we're going to run to go and deliver a level of lead gen that we think makes a lot of sense. And hopefully we can structure this in a way and either tackling all these things internally or outsourcing some of the work effort to an agency or whoever else to go and get that body of activity up and running and firing. The only last thing I want to mention here, and Joanne, I'm going to turn it back over to you, is this concept of it has to be simple and it has to just be easy and make sense. And I think a lot of time marketers sometimes substitute technology as a solution, and it's really not. Technology is an enabler of a great strategy. And so, you know, we've all seen those MarTech slides where there's a growing number of MarTech tools out in the market and available today. And the average marketer has something like 11 or 13 different tools in their stack. But we try to bring it down to the most simplistic form, which is you need a CRM, which is a system of record. And that's going to house all the data and information about your prospects and customers and perhaps even partners. That is your audience that you're trying to communicate to. And hopefully you've got organized nicely in a CRM. And from there, that pushes up into marketing automation, which is really the system of execution. And so together, between CRM and marketing automation, it's your database of contacts you wish to engage, and it's the ability with a marketing automation platform to actually go engage them through a variety of different features and functions, of which some of them we've tried to list right here as far as A/B testing and website tracking and all the way down the list. And from there, this core stack of two systems is going to push up into all the usual suspects that we call channels, starting first and foremost with websites and landing pages, and into whether it's social media or search via landing pages or even direct mail and ads and media. That's really where it's got to be. And all these things are going to either directly or indirectly point back into that marketing automation platform and collecting the data in the CRM, all of which needs to be governed by strategy. So that's kind of how we look at it. It's pretty simple. It can get a lot more complicated, but you got to start with a sound foundation. This is generally speaking how we think about it. Maybe Joanne, if you want to talk a little bit about the role that these tools and automation plays in supporting lead gen programs. I know we're getting close to the bottom of the hour here.
Sure. Well, and, you know, just for everyone listening, you know, don't let this diagram fool you. You know, I'm not saying that I do all of these things. I don't. But I think even though it can be overwhelming, there are ways to really understand how to create wins for yourself and understand that, you know, sometimes the challenge, and I was just saying this to Kevin earlier, you know, the challenge of I don't have a giant budget. Even though I have one marketing person in my department, me, I still don't have like $1 million a year to spend in marketing. We don't, and I probably never will, right? And I'm sure most of you out there listening have the same situation. It doesn't mean you can't use all these things to your advantage if you have the right plan, and you don't need to over-architect it, right? You know, I have worked in larger companies where I've had, even to the point where any leads that come in, we had territory assignment rules in the system. if you're in a company like me where you've got a handful of salespeople, you're not going to over architect that kind of thing. You're not going to generate these ridiculous programs of and pathways where leads are going to go to this landing page and then receive this email and 17 emails later and then do this. If that, you're not going to do that, right? If you do have an agency as a partner, you can get a lot more out of what you're doing though, right? And that's one of the things that I found. So for me, where I'm at is we're still in the building phase. So I'm really trying to build that database. I've done a really great job over the past couple of years. We've got a lot more people in that system. That also means that more volume means more touch points. So some of the things that I wasn't doing, let's say a year ago, I am doing more now. So I am creating a few more automations within my system so that when I do get a lead in, they are getting pointed to maybe a landing page that might be good for them. Do I have 1,700 landing pages? No, I have a handful, right? Do I have loads and loads of email templates? No, but I've got a few. And by using a good plan and a strategy, I'm able to maximize the time I have with my agency and maximize the kinds of things they can do with me to make sure that those touch points are coming through for all the people that I'm starting to get into the system. And let me be clear, like our sales cycles are 1 to 3 years. This is not a, hey, do you want the blue pen or the red pen situation? This is a long haul.
Right.
So it's not just one email. It's got to be lots of touch points. Right.
But I love that point, Joanne, this idea of scaling and sort of you're still building. And this is our final section here. And so this is also a question we hear a lot is, well, how do I scale this in terms of efforts, initiatives, campaigns, and process? And we like to call it this idea of like create a lead contribution grid for each quarter or maybe month. It depends. It doesn't matter. But it's this idea of asking yourself as the marketing leader, if we know we're on the hook, in this case, a hypothetical target of 350 marketing qualified leads per quarter, the number can be whatever, but it's this idea of, well, where will they come from? And the longer you go in your role, probably the tighter you'll be on the low and high expectations. But the idea is to say, okay, are we actually doing enough? Do we have enough marketing activity to create the volumes that we think we need to, at the end of the day, sell enough? And everyone knows their funnel breakdowns, 50% of marketing qualified leads will turn into a sales qualified, and our team closes 10 to 20% of those. So it's that numbers game that we all know real well, except do we have enough activity at the very top of the funnel to go drive the kinds of results to even give ourselves a chance? And I've used an average number of sort of $50 per marketing qualified lead to give a sense as to, well, what would the costs be? And maybe this varies, and each channel probably will have different average cost per leads, but this concept of really going through an exercise of saying, where will the leads come from and what is their contribution towards this target number? Because if you look at this example here, and they're all fictitious numbers, but I think it serves the point to say, well, if webinars, virtual events, and paid syndication sites really make up a bulk of, along with LinkedIn and paid search, if those really represent the bulk of contribution towards our lead gen targets, that's really where we've got to spend the most time. And maybe you can get away with using content in different channels, perhaps, but that's really where the thinking's got to go into, are we even going to be successful doing this? And I think that's really important. So our last slide here, just before we jump into a few quick questions, is how do we do this? Like, how do we think about this? And our advice is always, you have to establish what we call a business as usual, which is a foundation of always on marketing activities, really designed to balance that top of funnel marketing, as well as considering all of the other marketing operation stuff in the background. But this business as usual approach goes hand in hand with that contribution grid we had on the previous slide. All this is designed to actually help you and force you to say, are we doing enough activities to meet our numbers? And from there, you'll be able to detail all the responsibility and ownership around this always on initiative or business as usual, whether it's some of it's you as the marketing leader with your team and some of it's an outsourced resource. And this ability to sort of say, okay, if we have other projects coming in the future, we don't really want to turn off the business as usual to support the other projects. So this might actually force you to think about, well, do we have to separate budgets for additional projects? Maybe you have a customer conference that happens once a year and you view that entirely different from a lead gen project, no problem, but you have to start forecasting that into how you're going to run your department and ultimately use some of your marketing budget. And then finally, I think measurement's really, really key here. If you have that contribution grid or something like it, that's your first level of KPIs. Are we meeting those numbers? And from there, you can kind of build out these leading indicators of, do we have enough, I don't know, raw leads coming in that we have to qualify? Do we have enough email contacts in our database to actually go work with? And I know, Joanne, you mentioned this concept of you're still building the list, but it's like, if we don't have a big enough list, then we're going to have to go out somewhere to get new contacts to go meet those numbers. So lastly, my final point that I want everyone to take away with is a business as usual is really going to be important for your team to get into a flow and a rhythm of actually driving the right number of leads, but also leave room for this concept of testing and innovating. You can always make things better, so that the job here isn't let's get everything perfect and then launch. It's let's get something in the 85 to 90% good, get out there, and then learn from how it performs, because you're always going to learn a new program, initiative, message that you launch. And so it's important to be flexible on that, to actually test different concepts and ideas, know what sticks. And finally, having some sort of parking lot or roadmap of things that you want to try and maybe want to insert into your contribution grid later in the year as you get more secure and sound in what you're doing today. Perhaps those can act as projects, or maybe those are just initiatives that you'll run later in the year. So Joanne, maybe we can parlay this into some questions, because I see some questions here that are sort of similar and on the same lines of this, and I know we're pressed for time. Here's one question that we've had come in. It's, what do you think the most important element of marketing that should be kept internal? I know you mentioned this earlier, but I think there was a question around what should always be kept internal versus never outsourced, and what do you view as sort of got to stay within the organization itself?
Well, I guess I would say, I mean, really, it's the brand details, right? So if you're trying to uphold and elevate your brand, what are the things that are connected to that? Really, not the execution, not the vehicles, how you get it out there, but what is it? So how does it marry to the competitors in your industry? How does it uphold the industry you're in? What's your position in the industry that you're in? What have you been able to do for your customers? How does that help your brand, right? Like those key points are the things that you always want to keep internal, right? There are some cases where maybe you're doing a rebranding exercise, maybe you're hiring an agency to help you complete a big overhaul of your brand or something. I mean, that's a bit different. But if you're the one who needs to come up with the strategy on what things you're going to do to spend your money on to create results for sales and for the business, it's the industry specific, stuff around your brand that you keep internal always.
Awesome. And then we have time for one more question here, Joanne. The question is for you, of course. It is, how do you measure or evaluate a good agency from a bad agency? What do you look for in an agency when you're looking to task out components of your marketing program?
Well, I mean, listen, for me, again, I think I mentioned a little bit about budgets. I talked a bit about how I have an on-demand marketing team. And I actually take my full marketing budget and I use that marketing budget to hire a writer. I have a small design agency that I use. I have, a small agency, Goose Digital, to help me with a bunch of stuff. I also have a couple of other promotional contractors that I use. So not only do I use my budget to create my on-demand team, I also use it for the media spend. But because I do that, it means I don't have the amount of money that some other giant enterprise companies do for spending on media, right? Like Google AdWords. Some companies, I'm sure you guys all know, are spending $100,000 a month on Google Ads. Sometimes it's $250,000. Sometimes it's a lot of money. That is nowhere close to what I'm spending, right? But because of that, it also means that whatever agency that I go to or contractor that I'm using, I'm a smaller fish in a bigger pond sometimes. And I want to make sure that even though my business or my spend might be smaller, that my business still feels important, and that I get that feeling when I'm engaging with them. So that honestly, that's the most important thing to me. I particularly need a lot of different skill sets. So not only it's managing the marketing automation, but having someone who can help me with Salesforce. That's really important to me because I don't have enough time to go in there and create reports and import leads and create the connectors. I need that. But overall, my most important is that my business feels important, just as important as those big enterprise giants. So if anybody out there is listening, Honestly, that is the biggest thing that sways me one way or the other, because I've had experiences where I am paying the same amount of money to have someone monitor my accounts, and not just monitor, but optimize and improve my accounts on all these platforms, Google Ads, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever it is, among other things. But because I don't spend as much, I, maybe wasn't getting the right time in, right? I still want optimization. I don't want a cursory 5-second, okay, it's not blowing up type thing, right? I want to feel important. So.
Yep. Responsiveness and sort of willingness to jump in and sort of be proactive about concepts and ideas for growth rather than reactive is certainly key. We hear and see that all the time too. Wonderful. We're out of time, unfortunately. We have a few questions we didn't get to. We'd be happy to follow up with you individually to make sure you get those answers. We want to thank each and every one of you for signing up, registering, and listening to this session today. An extra special thanks to Joanne for her time and for sharing all of her experience, wisdom, and knowledge. Joanne, thank you so much. Once again, a recording of this webinar will be available within 2 business days. We'll follow up accordingly. Thank you so much for watching today's session. Have a great day.